So, talk about the Black Mozart.
Yes.
And the New World Symphonies.
Yes, the Black Mozart and the New World Symphonies is a project where I'm living the theme of what I say Futureman is. To understand the future, the quickest way to understand the future is look at the past. Okay, it's the moral of the story is, if you want to, this is ancient Moorish principle, if you want to know the measurements of the ceiling and you can't measure the ceiling, I can't reach the ceiling, measure the floor. Study the floor. You want to know the ceiling, study the floor. You want to know the future, study the past. Because what goes around just keeps coming around. You know? We look at the tendencies of humanity over and over and over. It's going to repeat. So let's look at the past. And what happens is when we look at the past, we start seeing the blueprints of what's happening. So the Black Mozart, the New World Symphonies, is looking back to a story. Me as a musician, evolving through the creations, and like Ray Kurzweil, I'm inventing stuff. I've invented the drums that I play with the flectones. I invented a piano. And from that piano is erupting a musical story. And which I feel like is a musical genre of storytelling. You know, when I say a genre, it's like if you're making movies, I always wanted to see movies about musicians and stuff. So the Black Mozart is a story of a great musician protagonist who's a hero in music and he's a hero in fencing. And it's not just a hero, he's a legend in music and a legend in fencing, a double hero, a very unusual kind of protagonist. So I get an opportunity, and the guy, when I met the dude, he's dressing like how I like to dress. And he's mixed race, so he's a black dude back during that time, dressing like me. I'm like, who is this guy wearing my stuff, right? Right, so anyway, I'm telling his story, and I've written an homage to that story because I understand the story. Here's a person of color during the great classical age. If you think about the great classical age, you don't see people of color. Think about Amadeus. Were there any people of color in that movie? Think about the movie Beethoven. Were there any people of color? Think about any classical movie that you saw, or any classical lit course that you took. Were there any people of color mentioned in those, right? So what I'm saying in this story, because I've discovered this protagonist, the Black Mozart, he was called the Black Mozart because he was, prior to Mozart, a great influence on Mozart, and they had a similar sound. Right? He conducted Mozart. He conducted the Paris Symphony. This is a bad man right here. And he was pretty like Muhammad Ali. Right? So imagine Muhammad Ali getting out of the boxing ring. He's a legend over here. And then he gets on the stage, and Mozart and Paganini and Itzhak Perlman and them are like getting stuff from him. Like he's leading the way in music. A legend. Not just good, a legend. So we got a double protagonist to deal with. And what I'm saying as a storyteller is just juicy because we've never had a protagonist like this before. The Black Mozart and New World Symphonies. I'm saying it's beautiful because I've written a symphonic work as an homage to him from the piano that I've done. And I'm telling the story. It's like a super opera for today. But today, if I tell an opera, I don't have to stick with the opera form in order to tell you the drama. You know, it's like Cirque du Soleil. In order for Cirque du Soleil to be a circus, they can create the greatest story you ever saw. Sometimes you forget that it was a circus. So the Black Mozart is a story of a protagonist who starts as a slave and rises to chivalry. That's the story in a nutshell. He rises from slavery, you know, and the expectations of slavery to chivalry. He has to fulfill a prophecy at birth that says this boy will not remain a slave, but will stand before kings and queens. It was an astonishing prophecy delivered at his birth, and he fulfills that prophecy tenfold. You know what I mean? He's one of the greatest heroes of stories, you know what I mean, ever told. So I get an opportunity to just dive into this story, wanting to be a storyteller with music and telling a story. So it's a project that, for me, is like it represents how composers in the past, I mean, not just regular composers, the great composers told great stories. They were great dramatists. Mozart brought you the magic flute. Wagner brought you the ring cycle. You know what I'm saying? The music was already good enough. So here I am in the modern time, and we're in the age of specialization. Oh, I'm a musician, and that's what I do, right? So now if you're a musician and that's what you do, and you want to get into storytelling, the best that you're going to do, pretty much, is write a soundtrack for someone else's story. You know what I mean? because we're in the age of specialization. What I'm saying is like Leonardo and Da Vinci and these guys, back in the day, Aristotle and these guys, they were Renaissance people. They were trying to see the whole picture. You know what I mean? And so in this age, the inspiration for the story is that they were great dramatists, and musicians of the past were always great storytellers. And so to me, I'm drawing on hearing my dad and my mom tell these great stories, and I get a chance to tell a story with the music, you know? And it's this idea that the musician, it's a natural thing to want to tell a story. And so I'm just fulfilling that. I'm not leaving it as a philosophy. I'm living what I'm telling you. I'm living it. You know what I mean? And so it's not like, just think with me for a minute. A musician puts a project out, say a great jazz musician, maybe Branford, because I've talked with Branford about this story. But do you expect Branford to tell a story like the Magic Flute? You know what I mean? You don't even really expect it. But if he did it, man, everybody would be like, whoa. You know what I mean? All of a sudden you're reaching out of your specialization age. You're reaching beyond your age. This is what Beethoven, Mozart, these pivotal people like St. George, they're reaching beyond their age, you know, to tell stories that we still tell today, right? They're not just musicians, they're dramatists, right? And so if you think with me, that becomes a concept. Like, what if the person that's doing the soundtrack is telling the story, you know? What if? You know what I'm saying? Like John Lennon said, imagine. You know, the musician. Imagine who's the dude that tells all the musicians, tells all the stories. John Williams. John Williams brings you whatever the next title is. You know, because John Williams does all these brilliant scores. But imagine if John Williams was bringing you the story. Then we would be back to the groundwork laid by Mozart, bringing you the Magic Flute. You know, Stravinsky bringing you Pulcinella or Rite of Spring, or something like that. They really had a strong vision that seized them with the music. Said, this is the story. Stravinsky's sacrifice. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's the tradition. Why? Futureman, I'm digging, man. The roots, that's where they dig. The roots don't dig in specialization. You know what I mean? Where I do music and I don't think about the story. I do music to someone else's story. That is not where the roots are. The roots were the musicians were the storytellers. And you can tell it more in music, and then you bring it out, you know? So that's the spirit. The Black Mozart is a great story that I'm digging into.
So you're writing